to that. Only to lose to North Carolina in the regular season finale, and then the neutral site Final Four game. Anyway, folks, we are up and running here on this live stream, and folks, college basketball season is officially over. We made it to the finish line. Okay, we had fans in the stands. We had a crazy COVID pause in the middle of the year, and we ended it like we should, yelling at referees at our television as the most meaningful games of the season are played. Kansas won it all. Probably one of the less objectionable teams to cut down the nets and to eventually raise a banner as far as the Final Four was concerned, or the final 8 or 16 teams were concerned. But with that said, now every single one of the 350 plus Division I basketball teams look ahead to next year, which gives Matt and I an opportunity to make some absolutely ridiculous predictions that will 100% be wrong.
I'm never wrong in these things
going into next year, but we'll cover that and so much more here on our 249th episode of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. We are recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Thursday, April 7th, 2022, where I'm your host, Nathan Krishnan. Here with me tonight is my normal podcast co-host, Matt Lukens. Matt, there's plenty of player news that still needs to be decided for the Indiana Hoosiers, but how are you doing as far as this April 7th is concerned? The NCAA tournament is over. What did you learn? Was there anything interesting that crosses your mind here based on watching those Final Four teams play last weekend?
Well, one, it's good to be a blue blood because the Final Four was all 4 blue bloods. Second thing I learned was recruiting guards is important. I think you look at all 4 teams that were in the Final Four. Duke probably had the worst guards, and there was a 5-star backcourt,
and it's Duke,
both of them, and it's Duke. So, and it was funny because there's a bunch of people who were on Twitter for IU talking about how close we were actually to getting Caleb Love and RJ Davis both to be in Bloomington, right? Not just one of them. Both of them were IU targets, and I remember both of them had IU in their Final Four or Final 3. The IU made the final cut for both the schools.
It's not like doesn't one of 30 schools in the row.
Right. Yeah. But that also doesn't mean we were like super close. We were really close. I think we were actually genuinely close to getting Caleb Love.
I remember that as well, right?
Yeah. So I would like to say to Hoosier Nation that if you believe in the staff, that a staff that can get the right players in, it doesn't take a miracle to turn this program from missing the tournament for 5 years straight. Well, actually, also, by the way, saying we missed it for 5 years straight is terrible because we would have made it in 2020 during COVID. But that's besides the point. Missing it 4 out of 5 years, we can say, to now, where we've not only made the tournament, but we have people on Twitter arguing whether Jordan Geronimo should come back next year at all or transfer because we have too many people that play the 4 or the 5, which is a whole other issue we'll talk about later in the podcast.
Make sense of that.
But depth matters. The deepest team in the tournament won in the end. Kansas was the deepest team, in my opinion. They probably could run 8 or 9 guys out there that would start on almost every team in college basketball. North Carolina lost because they lacked depth. They got in foul trouble. They started playing people.
Guys turn their ankles and get elbowed in the face.
But they didn't. Those guys shouldn't have been playing 40 minutes if they had some depth. If there's some reasonable depth, they probably wouldn't have been all banged up like they were in the final game. The reason Kansas was healthy is because they could give their big guys some rest. Like, McCormick's fantastic. And we'll talk about my dudes theory later that I brought up on the last podcast. But this Final Four also further catapulted my theory into further cementing it in my mind. McCormick is fantastic, but Mitch Lightfoot, who came off the bench, is no slouch either for a backup big. No. He did some really good work when he's in there in that championship game, I thought, against Baycott, who's just an absolute beast on the boards. So the thing to me is when I look forward to an IU team next year, which we'll be talking about roster predictions and stuff like that in this podcast. When I look forward to that, there are some things that need to happen that haven't happened consistently in this IU program for quite a long while. I think we have the staff that can pull it off, but there's got to be some serious player development this summer in order for us to reach a level comparable to the Kansas, the UNCs, the Dukes, what Michigan or Michigan State might have next year. A top 10 team, what Arkansas might have next year, speaking of a loaded team going into next year. Serious depth and multiple ways you can attack a team going into next year. There's a couple things that need to happen first. And so we'll talk about that as the podcast goes on.
Yeah, and along those lines, though, one of the things that I learned, and I know for a lot of Hoosier fans, this is going to freak you out, but bear with me here. I don't think Indiana's that far away, right? No. Like I'm not predicting a Final Four run next season. I'm not. But after watching 3 weeks of the NCAA tournament, what seems to matter more than your win-loss record, as crazy as it sounds, is you have to have your guys commit to the program for the full year. Yeah. Right? From the opening night in November to the final game in March to the preseason to the offseason. You just have to have a group of 13 scholarship players and walk-ons and trainers and assistants and fans all really commit, right? North Carolina played a very different group of players in March than they played in November.
Yes.
Okay. Vastly different. A team like Duke or Villanova, Kansas too, they had bumps along the way. Kansas got crushed by Kentucky in the Big East. That's in the Big 12 SEC Challenge that happened in the middle of the season.
Destroyed. They got
not early non-conference. By the way, in early non-conference, Kansas lost to Dayton, a team that didn't make the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
And what this tells me is absolutely during the regular season, there are a lot of landmark moments that you can achieve, right? And IU fans are going to remember Rob Finney's game winner against Purdue, those big wins against Ohio State. Of course, translating that into Big Ten tournament success and an NCAA tournament bid. But when I look at, I think about a team like Arkansas beating Gonzaga, and I think about North Carolina beating Baylor, and I look at this and I say, if Indiana can elevate their offense going forward and continuously show attentiveness and engagement and buy-in, I think Indiana is going to be making a lot of noise in short notice. Now, what I also learned from the NCAA tournament is that it doesn't hurt to get a little lucky, okay? That's a factor in a lot of this, right? You think about a team like North Carolina, well, they stumbled across St. Peter's in the Elite Eight, right? You think about a team like Duke, they had an exhausted Arkansas team in the Elite Eight round as well. How about Villanova, who gave up one of the lowest 3-point percentages I've ever seen when Houston shot 1 for 20 against them from downtown, right? Sometimes you need a little luck, and the way you capture that as a basketball program is by routinely getting into the NCAA tournament, by routinely playing your best basketball late in the season, and that way Indiana can put themselves in the best situation possible. I thought it was absolutely awesome to see the Superdome packed to the rafters as I was watching the Final Four in the national title game. Just an amazing scene, amazing environment. It helped that the games were great also, especially that UNC Duke game, the UNC Kansas game. but just seeing that many fans love college basketball and jam-pack that stadium down in New Orleans, absolutely outstanding. So that puts the past college basketball season in the books. But like we just mentioned, so much going on as far as transfer portal things and draft declarations. Not much news right now regarding IU personnel. We know that the 4 existing players put themselves in the portal. We're awaiting decisions, confirmations from Trace Jackson Davis, Race Thompson, Xavier Johnson, among others. A friendly reminder, Indiana does head to Kansas, right? They're going to be facing the reigning champs in December 2022. That, by the way, takes place at the Crossroads Classic this upcoming year. It's also possible North Carolina visits Bloomington as part of the ACC Big Ten Challenge, which would be interesting to see. Carolina played at home last year in the Big Ten ACC. Indiana played at Syracuse. You got to try your best to flip every year. We'll see what happens there. Indiana is in the top 25 and way too early top 25s on CBS, ESPN, John Rothstein as well. Indiana, if they bring back Trace Jackson Davis and Xavier Johnson, you can totally see the argument, which got us thinking, Matt. If CBS and ESPN can put out way too early top 25s for next year, why don't we just jump in and make some crazy predictions for the upcoming season? We know that a lot of things have to come down the pipeline, but why not get a little crazy, have a fun conversational type episode this week here as we get into the thick of the off season. Hit me with something that's on your mind, Matt. What's one crazy prediction sure to go wrong for next season? It could relate to scheduling, could relate to players, could relate to college basketball overall. Hit me with something ridiculous.
We get a transfer that's a guard.
Ooh, I didn't expect a guard.
A guard. I also expect 2 players that played very little minutes this year to get major minutes next year.
Ooh. All right.
Let's much more. That's my two predictions.
So let's talk about that first one here. You said we get a transfer, a guard out of the portal. Now, to give all of you a quick reset on IU's roster for the upcoming season, there is 1 spot to fill, 4 players in the portal, 3 incoming freshmen, Caleb Banks, Jalen Hood-Schifino, and CJ Gunn. A lot of the names we've seen Indiana associated with right now in the portal, players like Johnny Broom out of Morehead State, players like Peyton, I forgot his last name, out of Ball State, and others. In fact, I even saw Peyton Sparks out of Ball State. We've seen Indiana get associated with a lot of forwards. We've heard Malik Renault, the high school senior, who's looking to make his decision coming up here. But you're saying guard play. We're going to add a guard. I think that's interesting. Is there a name that you have in mind, or is that something that's sort of to be determined?
It's great you asked that. I have 4 names in mind.
Wow.
4. Right now. There could be more, but the names you need to remember are Sean McNeil, who we've talked about before on this podcast, from West Virginia. I think he would be the best option out there for this. A sneaky second best option is Dexter Dennis. He's a guy that just transferred yesterday. So he's getting...
He is one of the guards I've seen Indiana associated with as far as the reports are concerned.
He's a 4-year, 26 to 30 minutes per game getter at Wichita State.
Yep.
Pretty good program, by the way. He's got a lot of experience. He's a decent shooter from 3. His worst year shooting 3-pointers was last year when he shot just under 30% from 3. However, I read something about he had a wrist injury that he's playing through last year. So he's a 40% free throw. He's a 40% 3-point shooter his freshman year and 33% the 2 years previous to that, or 2 years after that. So you could basically say he's a 33% 3-point shooter, but he's very well known for his defense. That's the thing. It doesn't matter. He averages like 8 points per game, something between 8 and 9 points per game. So he's a decent scorer of the ball, and the AAC is pretty good. So he's the American Athletic is good. He's somebody I would take a look at. Tyreek,
just to finish on Dennis, Mike Woodson's going to love that defensive mindset that he brings to the table.
He's also he's a big guard, and that's something that I really like about it. He's 6'5", so he can. We'll talk about roster construction later, but he can play as a third guard basically, and that's
the reigning conference defensive player of the year.
Right. So he's really good. If you're going to go a little bit smaller for guard, Tyreek Key from Indiana State. Some of you guys might be familiar with him if you followed basketball in the state. He, again, is a career 37% three-point shooter who shot just around 100 three-pointers each of the last 3 years. Actually, 144 in 2019, and he shot 38%, 144 threes. It was pretty good. He's also averaged 17 points per game the last 3 years. Pretty good. Again, the Indiana State Sycamores play a very different level of competition, and he's 6'3", and his defense is fairly questionable, but he tries really hard and he can score. That's an option we could look at. The last guy to look at, and I think is one of, if not the most intriguing, is Cameron Healey. Now, he's a brand new guy we've been added to the list of. He originally started in, I believe, Albany. He played for Albany for 3 years. Last year, he transferred to Central Michigan.
Correct.
And he went up a level from Albany, that's probably a bit lower, to Central Michigan. Was
low major to mid-major.
Low major to mid-major, and he's still averaged double-digit points and even increased his three-point percentage. He's a career 37% three-point shooter. He's 6'3", and he's from New Zealand. No, sorry, he's from Australia.
Yeah,
he's Australian. He to me is one of the most interesting guys. What stands out to me the most, besides his three-point shooting, is that he's actually fairly low on turnover ratio, which is really good.
Sign me up for that.
As a two guard. So again, that would be a much more offensive, like Tyreek Key and Cam Healey. But I would say something along the lines of it would be a slam dunk home run grand slam if we get Sean McNeil or Dexter Dennis, and then it's a pretty good addition if we get the other two guys. That's my first thing. I think one of those four will be in a Hoosier uniform next year. And that would mean that either A, somebody else transfers out of the program,
right,
or B, we don't get Malik Renault, which is the 5-star recruit that we're in for.
Exactly. And based on what you're telling me, though, and based on my quick look into each of those four players, they all seem to be guys who fit with the current roster. So, you can definitely see a player like Sean McNeil or Dexter Dennis playing the same backcourt as Xavier Johnson.
They walk into this team.
And that's something you now more than ever really pay attention to because of how many transfers there are. If it's a really long adjustment process, you might run into a problem. Now, I want to look into that second prediction you made. You said there were two players on the current team that did not get much playing time last season, who will get a major uptick in minutes next year. Now, if you ask me, the subset of players that could include our Logan Duncan, Anthony Leal, and then to a certain degree, Tamar Bates, Trey Galloway. Unless you want to bring a walk-on into the picture, which two of those guys did you have in mind, or as far as that's concerned?
Well, the first one is based off of positional need. I think Logan Duncan, looking at this roster, is going to have to get some time, and that's what I alluded to in the beginning intro monologue that I had in the podcast, that there needs to be something that hasn't happened consistently at IU, and that's player development. Some serious player development. Duncan, what has to go from a guy that played in garbage time last year to a dude that can guard for at least 5 minutes a game, right?
Well, I think you've got to ask him to do more than that, man.
Yeah,
at this point,
No, because I'm not sure about that because I think you could move a race in emergency to a 5 if he were to come back. But you got to ask Logan to do more, significantly more than he was doing last year, right?
Yeah.
He's got to be there in practice every single day. He's got to make sure that he's a good matchup against Trace and a good scout team guy. You got to make sure that there's a whole level that he actually needs to probably skip. He needs to go up like 2 or 3 levels here in the offseason. And, he came in, we knew he was a hard worker. When he came in, he was recruited, something that was talked about and pointed out by the staff. He's got to put that work in the summer in a full regular summer offseason. The second guy to me, Nathan.
Yeah. Well,
unless you have anything to add on Logan Duncan before?
No, I think it's a great point. I'm excited to see Logan Duncan take that step up. If Indiana does not go down the path of adding Malik Renew or adding a forward through the portal, right? You're not talking about a scrub prospect here. He's a 4-star kid, top 75 in the country as far as the class of 2021 rankings are concerned. Wisconsin, Iowa offers. We know how successful those programs are. Let's go. I love the idea of seeing more Logan Duncan next season.
Yeah, he also can space the floor. He's somebody we've seen hit threes before, whether it was in the exhibition games or whatever it was.
I want to see him take the Michael Durr role, right? I mean, let's see. He's shorter than Durr is, but you're also not dealing with as many behemoths in the Big Ten in all likelihood. So I want to see that. Who's the second guy you had in mind?
That would be Tamar Bates. Yeah. But now Tamar Bates, what I mean by significant, Tamar was part of the rotation.
Well, he was at 14.5 last year per game.
Yeah, that goes to 30 this year.
Yeah.
All right. He's a starter this year. If the season that IU wants to have occurs next year, Tamar Bates is not only a starter, but we'll go back to my dudes theory. He's one of the dudes.
Yeah.
Okay. Because let's say the reports or the / rumors end up being true, right? We saw today, Nathan was probably going to talk about this in social media shout out or whatever.
Just a moment, actually, and who won the week. But yeah.
And who won the week. All right, so I won't steal his thunder, but there's Trace and Race will win the week this week in a couple seconds, okay, for a certain reason that Nathan can point out and talk about, and that I'm stealing his thunder. If they are to come back like the rumors say they are, and like I think they will, because I don't think Trace is going to leave for to be the 50th pick and ride on a bus for half the year to G League games. Okay. I fully expect that Tamar has to be the third dude, right? Because if Trace comes back, we're not getting Malik Reneau. You can throw that pipe dream out the window. Okay, guys, it's not happening. All right. Unless Logan Duncan transfers, because Malik would whatever. Or maybe we get Malik Reneau and then Logan Duncan transfers.
If we're not going to have if Malik Reneau comes to Indiana, Mike Woodson and the staff will make it work. That's all I'm going to say,
But if you bring in basically, okay, what I'm trying to say is that given the fact that they're going after mostly guards with, I think, like a couple bigs mixed in, right? Yeah. I feel like they're looking for a guard, which means they expect Trace to come back. And if they're expecting Trace to come back and we get Malik Reneau, I think you might look at Logan Duncan transferring. That's a whole different. But anyways, back to Tamar Bates. Tamar Bates is going to have to be one of the dudes, all right? He has to be one of the dudes for this team. And those dudes are, well, I said that my dudes theory is that every really good college basketball team has to have a big three dudes of some sort. That's 3 guys that can take over the game at any given point. IU has 2, all right? They have 2. I'm sorry, Race Thompson isn't one of them. You're not going to count on him to do that. Jordan Geronimo isn't one of them. You don't want to count on Jordan Geronimo to do it. It has to be Tamar Bates. He's got the talent to do it. He's got the pedigree to do it. He literally is in the position to do it, because you have Xavier Johnson and Trace Jackson Davis. You have a point guard who Tamar doesn't need the ball.
Yep.
You have a big that attracts attention down low. and Tamar's a guy that likes to go and get a bucket. All right.
And I mean, just think he can be Indiana's RJ Davis, or he can be Indiana's Remy Martin, right? I mean, that's the kind of player you're expecting to see. Remember, Tamar Bates and Malachi Branham at Ohio State were neck and neck in the class of 21 recruiting rankings. That's the kind of potential Tamar Bates has.
And Tamar Bates can have a better season than Branham had this year, next year. It's very possible, especially with the players surrounding him. And so I can say very confidently that I believe next year's starting lineup will end up being Xavier Johnson at the 1. By the way, he's not leaving. All right. The program is not kicking him out.
We'll see.
That's not it's not happening.
We're not breaking news on this podcast. No, it's just we don't think he's out the door.
No, I would highly doubt it. Xavier Johnson at the 1. One of the transfers at the 2. At the 3, Tamar. So Tamar playing as the third guard. Geronimo takes over the starting spot at the 4, and Trace at the 5, with Race, Duncan, Jalen Hood-Schifino, Trey, and one of the freshmen off the bench. And that's one heck of a 10-man rotation. And one of the freshmen off the bench, this rotation
Miller Kopp is probably included in there too.
Oh yeah, my bad. Miller Kopp, yes, of course. I forgot Miller's even on the team. Yes, Miller Kopp will be included in that. Yeah. So again, if Malik Renault were to commit, my prediction is I expect Logan Duncan to transfer. If he doesn't commit, I expect him to stay and get some serious development. One of those two things have to happen. Tamar Bates also has to get serious development this summer, right? The ball's got to be in his hands.
I agree with that completely. In fact, I'd go so far as to say Indiana's success largely hinges on the improvements that Tamar Bates and Jordan Geronimo make in the offseason. Even if Geronimo's a 6th man or he gets 25 minutes a night, whatever it is, right? Him stepping up and being a lethal force in the playing time he gets, I think will be huge for the Hoosiers.
Nathan, what is significant improvement to you for Tamar Bates? Like, is it points per game? Well, obviously it's gotta be points per game, but like what's one number that isn't points that you're gonna look at and be like, that's got to improve significantly for him to be one of the dudes?
It's connected to points, but 3-point percentage, right? Yeah. I think that's a really big one. I need to see the percentage. I need to see the attempts, right? You think about Parker Stewart moving on with his career. He took 4 threes a game at 39%. That means you got 4 threes that you got to make up on the court somewhere. Rob Finnis, he took 3 per game from downtown last year. It's another 3 pointers that you need someone to fill in. I want to see Tamar Bates at 4 to 5 threes a game next year, hitting 36, 37+%. He's got the form. He's got the mindset. There's no reason he can't do that. And so for someone who is a 5-star prospect and has all the praise and the attention of coaches like Shaka Smart, who he committed to at one point in time, there's no reason Tamar Bates can't be a starting player on this team next year, or at least a key rotation piece. So I like the call you made as far as Leland Bates are concerned. Yeah, Bates only 14.5 minutes per game last year, and it actually went down in conference play. So interesting to keep an eye out as far as that's concerned. We're going to get into some more crazy predictions here, but first it's time for Who Won the Week this past week in IU sports. And yes, folks, 14 IU athletes, as news came down here on, I believe, Thursday this week. 14 IU athletes signed NIL, name, image, and likeness deals with Hoosiers for Good. Hoosiers for Good is an organization that partners IU athletes with charitable causes to amplify philanthropic work in the state of Indiana. And according to Peegs.com, they reported that $470,000 were distributed to 14 IU athletes, including Tywan Mullen, Race Thompson, and Trace Jackson Davis, to do things like sign autographs, speak, promote these charities on their social media posts, and really get the good word out there about how you can help people who are underprivileged or do need assistance. Trace Jackson Davis and Race Thompson joined forces to be a partner with Turnstone at Stop the Violence Indianapolis. So seeing that kind of effort put in place, Trace Jackson Davis with Turnstone, Race Thompson with Stop the Violence Indianapolis, is wonderful to see. Other athletes included in this include Brittany Ford, a softball player with Raleigh Children's Hospital, women's basketball players Mackenzie Holmes and Grace Berger with Indiana Wish, football players Matthew Bedford and Jack Tuttle with the Indiana region of the American Red Cross, volleyball player Cameron Hayworth, soccer player Jordan Levy with Habitat for Humanity, football players DJ Matthews Jr. and Taiwan Mullen with Boys and Girls Club of Bloomington, along with swimming and diving athlete Ann Fowler. You also had football players AJ Barner and Sean Shivers, who partnered with Recycle Force. So great to see these student athletes not only capitalize on NIL, but also do it in a positive light. Now, the interesting news is that Jeff Rabjohns of Peaks.com is reporting that he's heard Jackson Davis and Race Thompson have signed on for 6-figure deals out of that $470,000 that was distributed. But it's important to note that former Indiana athletic director Fred Glass, who is part of the council for Hoosiers for Good, has explicitly stated this does not attach them to committing to IU next season. NIL deals agreed upon in the spring do not affect eligibility in the fall. So as far as Trace Jackson Davis and Race Thompson are concerned, if they feel like they can go pro and honor these NIL deals by speaking remotely or making in-person appearances, this does not lock them into another season in Indiana. However, as Matt and I spoke before this podcast, it definitely doesn't reduce the likelihood of Jackson Davis and Thompson coming back to IU for next season. So Matt, I'm not even sure if you would consider Jackson Davis and Thompson a package deal at this point where either both of them return or neither of them return. But do you have any follow-up thoughts as far as these 14 student athletes, especially Jackson Davis and Thompson, as far as their Hoosiers for Good agreement?
I'll just keep it short and simple. Go get the bag. All right. Go get the bag. And also this is everybody. So specifically on Thompson and Trace Jackson Davis is actually even more specifically on Thompson, right? When I was talking about being the three dudes, right? I did not bring up Thompson, right? He's not a name that I brought up because I said that, he wasn't, right? He wasn't one of them. He's not one of the three. The fact that somebody like a Race Thompson can play at Indiana and get a 6-figure NIL deal.
Amazing.
It's amazing for Race, but it's a really nice recruiting tool, right? That's something where I go on a green room with Ant Wright later and I tell him that. He goes, huh? Because not every school is out there paying 6 figures to their glue guy, all right, for being a glue guy, right? Trace getting 6-figure offers, not unheard of in college basketball, okay? Not unheard of, even before NIL. Not unheard of. All right. Ask LSU.
Ask Will Wade, yeah.
Ask Will Wade. It's not unheard of. But Race getting 100 G or 100 G's. Now we're talking, right? There's some money to be thrown around at these IU basketball athletes and IU football athletes, by the way, as well, because DJ Matthews and Taiwan Mullen. But they're specifically with basketball, there's some serious money to be thrown at these guys. And it's something that the national media, they kind of understand, but they don't really understand. Okay. They don't really get it. It's not, and not like I'm down here in Florida and people are like, oh, Duke, Kentucky, North Carolina, UCLA. No, IU is or Kansas, right? IU is very much in that mix as far as money wise, if not ahead of some of those schools as far as endowment goes, all this other stuff. So there's money for these student athletes. And when you're out on the recruiting trail talking to the parents of a Malik Renew,
yep,
and you're sitting there like, by the way, congratulations, Malik Renew on winning and Jalen Hood-Schifino on winning the Geico National Championship for high school basketball, which isn't really a national high school championship for national basketball because they just kind of invite teams and it's not like some giant tournament, but whatever. Congratulations to them for winning another trophy 2 years in a row. Absolutely. But when they walk into the house and Mike Woodson plays the tape of Doc Rivers saying he's the best coach that ever lived, and he walks in to the family room and he shows them a picture of Race signing $100G. One deal, by the way. That's not the only deal he's gonna get, right? Making more than $100,000 just for playing college basketball at Indiana. Right, he gets a free ride, he gets free meals, he gets to go to all the parties and have fun, and he gets paid $100,000 on top of it to live his best life. All right, that's hard for somebody to fathom, even being in the position to receive something like that, let alone for other schools to even attempt to even match that. All right. And so as NIL gets crazier, I'm sure you'll hear some crazy sums, but this is a good start for IU because look, Trace is going to get his deals, but the fact that Race is getting it shows that you don't even have to be the dude at IU, all right, to get money. Like the money's there for these guys. So it'd be interesting to see what other athletes on IU's or other players on IU's team, what they're getting as the offseason kind of moves along and NIL becomes more familiar to a lot of people.
Yeah. And it's going to be, right? We know Hoosier Hysterics has their NIL stuff out there. Adidas has announced they're going to be expanding their program a little bit more coming up, especially with the schools they're partnered with like IU. So plenty of opportunities here for the young student athletes at Indiana University. And as you talk about those recruiting visits, I'm thinking of mom and dad or grandma and grandpa or the guardians involved. They're going to like the fact that, they're going to not be signing the $100,000 deal, but they're going to be signing autographs for underprivileged people with disabilities, things like that, really making that positive impact in the community. That's what Turnstone is, by the way. Trace Jackson Davis's charity. It's an agency that helps folks with disabilities, helps their families' unique needs there. So really nice to see Trace Jackson Davis do that. So those are the 14 student athletes who won the week. If you would like to subscribe to our podcast for free, all you have to do is search for the Hoosier Sound wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay up to date with all of our information by following us on Twitter at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound. If you enjoy our show, leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links. That kind of support, give us that 5-star review on Apple, really helps us grow this podcast and reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. I see some of those passionate fans in our live stream right now on YouTube. You can follow us on the Hoosier Sound, subscribe. If you head over there, you can obviously watch the full-length video for free on replay throughout the week, in addition to the audio uploaded to wherever you listen to podcasts. Forrest Gray says Jalen Hood-Schifino is going to start at the 2, even assuming Xavier Johnson is still in the program. I completely agree. No. As I watch Jalen Hood-Schifino play, I see somebody who has an unbelievable toolkit ready to work with Mike Woodson and the staff. The size and the strength and the skill, he has the full package. The shooting might be lagging behind some of the other things, but with that said, he's someone who still has an aggressive attacking mindset when it comes to hitting the accelerator on those drives to the rim, and then of course distributing to his shooters. And you think if Miller Kopp possibly comes back, or Tamar Bates develops that jump shot, or Jordan Geronimo works the pick and pop, or you add a player like Sean McNeil in the portal, wonderful possibilities there with Jalen Hood-Schifino. Of course, he could kick it to Xavier Johnson for a 3 guard-to-guard situation there. It's great to see Indiana go in this direction, but let's dive into some more crazy predictions for the upcoming year. Here's mine, Matt. I'm thinking about scheduling a little bit, right? I got one for you. Indiana's not going to have a 300 and something ranked non-conference strength of schedule next year. You already start looking down the line. Road game at Kansas, you're almost definitely going to get a prominent Big Ten ACC Challenge opponent come to Assembly Hall. It could be North Carolina, it could be Virginia. Again, a lot of it is kind of process of elimination because Indiana's probably going to get a big-ish team as far as like a high-profile team. And then if the ACC team played at home last year, well, they probably have to go on. They almost definitely have to go on the road the following year because Indiana was on the road last year. So you can kind of come to those conclusions. I'm feeling that North Carolina matchup. North Carolina could go to Iowa, for example. That's probably the other possibility. But what's also potentially something that could come through is Indiana in the Gavitt games may play Villanova for the first time in a long time. And that's my crazy prediction that not only will Indiana have Kansas, and not only will Indiana have North Carolina, I think Indiana will also have Villanova as far as their non-conference strength of schedule next year. And if that happens, folks, then you can start really getting a grasp of how good this team is before Big Ten play. I also think Indiana will try to put St. Peter's on their schedule in non-conference play, even with Shaheen Holloway taking the Seton Hall job. I think it would be an interesting matchup, especially if St. Peter's carries over that pressing mindset, even with a new roster, as you may have heard a lot of their key players enter the transfer portal to capture bigger opportunity. But St. Peter's would be a quad 4 home game that you pay to come play at Assembly Hall. But like I said, Matt, heavyweight non-conference schedule. Let's go. Let's see what kind of thing can happen. How afraid does that make you of Indiana's win-loss record next year?
It doesn't actually make me that afraid. I think like Villanova next year, I don't think it's going to be as good because Villanova is only as good as their point guard. Okay. And Colin Gillespie being gone, there's obviously big shoes to fill. They'll probably be working out some kinks in the beginning of the year. And since we're possibly returning most of our team, we should be stronger earlier in the year than we were last year. By the way, some backup information for why Nathan is like basically pleading over the Villanova matchup.
What?
Nathan's in Philadelphia, so
true.
So there's a little bit of
and it would probably be a road game for
exactly. There's a little bit of selfishness in what Nathan is talking about. Exactly. I don't want to play Villanova at all. However, if we do play them any year, I think next year sounds fine. Though I said that about who did I say about this year, and I was totally destroyed.
St. Mary's by any chance, or was it a non-conference that even?
No, I said this at the beginning of the year. The end of Wisconsin. I said if there's any year we get a win at Wisconsin, this is the year. We almost did it, by the way. But anyways, they ended up actually having a really good season. Johnny Davis took an incredible jump that I obviously didn't expect. I wouldn't mind Tamar Bates taking, but an incredible jump, and they end up having a fantastic year. So I've been wrong in the past on the podcast, and I'm willing to admit that. However, I don't think Villanova will be as good as a Final Four team next year because, they need a point guard to run that system. And so I like the Villanova idea. I got family in Philly that would definitely go to the game.
Got a couch to crash on in Philly.
That's true. I can fly in from Japan. Kansas, of course, we're playing them. Whoever we get in the Gavitt games is great.
Well, the one thing is Kansas is the only locked game on the schedule that we've talked about so far. The other two completely.
The Gavitt games
hypothetical.
The Gavitt games are always good, and so are the ACC Challenge. It's always a good game, regardless of who we play. Right? Like, it's a good game. I would like IU to add one more Power 5 school on the West Coast to the schedule, either going to IU or going to the West Coast. I would like to see a series between that. I don't know why Adidas doesn't do it, but I would love for Adidas to do what like Nike does, like the Nike Hoop Summit. They bring all the big Nike teams in. I don't know why they don't do that for Adidas. We're playing Kansas, another Adidas school. Like there's Adidas or UCLA, Kansas, IU, and I'm trying to think of the fourth big
Louisville.
Louisville's yeah. So and they're all in 4 different conferences, right? So those are the big Adidas schools. I would love to see IU play one of those. There's got to be a Big 12 team. No, because Kansas is the Big 12 team. There's got to be another team somewhere that uses Adidas. It's bigger than Louisville, but yeah, I mean, those 4 programs playing in a kind of like like in Las Vegas or something like that would be a lot of fun.
Oh, here you go. I found a list: Arizona State, Georgia Tech, Louisville, Miami. Texas A&M, Washington, out in Seattle, NC State, Mississippi State.
All right, so Louisville it is.
Could be Miami. Miami made an Elite Eight run this past season. I don't know how much stock you put into those sort of things. Of course, Louisville coaching change, all sorts of craziness going on there. But
that wouldn't be too bad because all 4 teams could play each other in a rotation because they're not all in the same conference. So that would be good.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a bad idea. I don't know if it's feasible logistically for this upcoming season, but Indiana
not for the upcoming season, but for
bringing
the future,
bringing together 3 other teams, something similar to the Crossroads Classic, but of course, more spread out geographically. I think it's something is a way Indiana can absolutely prop up their non-conference strength of schedule going forward. Of course, you don't want to overcook it. The Big Ten is always going to be pretty intimidating. So
to be honest, I think next year should be winnable. By the way, I think next year should be. Depends what happens to Kofi Coburn at Illinois. Yep, I could see them. I could see them take a step back, even though they got Sky Clark today, 4-star teammate of Jalen Hood-Schifino at Mount Vernon.
5-star teammate.
He's a 4-star, 5-star, whenever you look. Yeah, he's like the Tamar Bates level. He's like the French. Let's see. Michigan.
As I look at John Rothstein's top 45, his first Big Ten team is Michigan. Of course, so much of this is up in the air as far as who's going to come back, who's going to return. Indiana, Michigan State, all in the conversation. Purdue as well. So that's going to be interesting.
That's the top 4.
It all plays out. Yeah,
and then there's a cliff. Nathan. There is a cliff after that top 4. All right, it is a long fall until you get to Ohio State.
Yeah, Ohio
Wisconsin
State,
replacing Johnny Davis, Iowa State replacing Keegan Murray,
Iowa, not Iowa State, but yeah.
Did I say Iowa State? I meant Iowa. Nebraska. Nebraska is going to be in like that tier. Penn State's going to be terrible. Rutgers should be terrible. They should lose basically everybody.
Yeah. About time. Sick of Rutgers being good.
That team is that group of players is crazy.
I do see
that good for Rutgers.
Yeah, I do see Forrest Common left. He says if Race or Trace come back, Indiana will contend for the Big Ten title. Again, like I said at the start of this episode, I don't think Indiana's that far away from being an Elite Eight level contending team, right? And so if that's the truth, then I agree with Forrest Common as well.
I don't think that's a hot take. Like, how many players like Trace Jackson Davis return for a 4th year? All right.
Rare.
He's averaged near 20 for like 3 years now, right? You don't get that guy to come back for a 4th year. You don't get that guy to come back for another year usually, right? So for 4 years, he's a senior. Like, he's super experienced. He's played against literally, you can name any style of basketball. He's either played it or played against it at this point. Right. So there's nothing that's going to surprise him on the court. He's the clear leader of the team. Like he's a special player. He's going to be up there in all-time points for IU at the end of the day, and all-time rebounds at IU, and probably all-time blocks the way he was playing last year. If he plays another year like that, he's going to climbing the charts there too. He's going to be amongst the all-time greats statistically at IU. And that's a very special player. You add in a player like Xavier Johnson returning. You add in a 5-star recruit, Jalen Hood-Schifino. You possibly add another 5-star recruit and Malik Renew. You have a 5-star recruit on the roster in Tamar Bates that could take that jump. And you have a bunch of other dudes on the roster we haven't mentioned that could also take a jump. One of which we haven't talked about a lot yet, and that's Trey Galloway.
Yeah.
Trey Galloway, if he develops I'm not talking like a 39% 3-point shot. I'm talking 1 out of every 3. If he can hit 33% of his threes, by God, we got a team. All right. Because between his defense, his hustle, his ability to share the ball, his selflessness, he's got a layup package, right? His other tools in his toolkit are so good, except he can't play on the perimeter. So if he develops a 3-point shot, this is great. There's another player that develops a 3-point shot is fantastic. Actually, 2. Geronimo and Race.
Oh, yeah.
You talked about Race developing last year. He kind of showed it in bits and spurts, but more consistently. Geronimo hitting it more consistently, being an everyday game threat is something that could literally catapult him from he had 20 minutes per game last year, 18 minutes per game or whatever it was, to 30, right? He becomes instantly irreplaceable on this team.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Geronimo last season hovering right in that 18-minute per game. For Geronimo, he was in that 12-minute per game range. So we really need him to take that step up. We'll see what happens over the course of the offseason here. Overall, though, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how these things play out. The schedule just needs to be tougher for Indiana next year to get a grasp of who they want to be. And IU's got to win that math problem on the court. I thought it was interesting. Kentucky last season, this past season, had one of the lowest 3-point attempt rates in college basketball. It was no surprise that when they were in a bit of a tough contest against St. Peter's, they really couldn't land a successive number of haymakers to pull away from the Peacocks. So just interesting to think in mind. You don't have to be the Houston Rockets of a few years ago or the Golden State Warriors, but you gotta win the math problem a little. That's bit fun to
watch
as far as the 3-point shot is concerned. It's time for a social media shout out as we look across Facebook, Twitter, Instagram for all sorts of interesting things to bring to the table as far as it relates to IU sports. Yeah, Matt, you mentioned Doc Rivers giving Mike Woodson a shout out during a pregame press conference earlier this week when Rivers Sixers were in town to face the Pacers. You don't see that happen too much. I really didn't hear any coaches get a shout out over the course of the last couple of weeks, except for Mike Krzyzewski. To see Rivers give Woodson some praise there unprompted was pretty excellent. I also wanted to give a shout out to Micah Mcfadden, Indiana's recent dynamite linebacker, who, according to PFF_college, was given the top pass rush grade among all NFL draft eligible linebackers over the course of the last 2 seasons. When you include 2020 and 21, it's funny that McFadden, one of the elite linebackers, isn't really discussed all that much at the top of NFL draft projections, but I know for a fact that whoever does take McFadden in the draft, whether it's day 2 or day 3, they're going to get an absolute gem of a player in Micah Mcfadden. Can't wait to see how the draft plays out in a few weeks, but a reminder, if anything relates to Indiana football as the NFL draft is concerned, or anything more about IU men's basketball, women's basketball, baseball, you name it, you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube. We are Indiana HQ there. You can also follow us at the Hoosier Sound. On Instagram, Matt, we are not Indiana HQ, but what are we?
Indiana.HQ.
There we go. That's where you can find us for all sorts of posts and updates and content and retweets. Make sure you like and subscribe. We're here for you to be your one-stop shop for IU sports. Matt, to wrap things up here on our crazy prediction podcast, college basketball rules really bothered me. They really bothered me over the course of the last, 4 to 6 weeks. Just a lot of craziness. Matt, one thing I want to see college basketball do away with this upcoming season refuse to adjust the clock for 1 second or 1 or 2/10 of a second. It's an absolute buzzkill at the end of games. If you want to review things for 3-point shot versus 2-point shot, I get it. If you want to review a flagrant foul, I get it. I love review as much as any person, but to see officials in close late games just got from 7.9 to 7.8, I'm sick of it. I even think college basketball should go as far as to institute a challenge system like the NBA has. I don't think they'll go that far. What are your thoughts? I mean, the end of the game is the best part of the game. And all we end up seeing are officials reviewing calls and people calling timeout. I'm sick of it.
It's true. There's too much. It's like sitting time.
The
like
best college basketball games are the ones where the last minute takes a minute.
Right. Yeah, no, I was showing my students. I've been substitute teaching at my local high school just to make some money in the time before I'm going over to Japan. And when March Madness was happening on a Thursday and Friday, I was like, all right, guys, like, I'm going to be honest, I want to watch this. So I'm just going to put this on the TV. You guys can watch it with me because, it's better than doing geometry. I'm telling you that much that we're doing in class. So like, okay, fantastic. So I put it on and one of the games is like ending, like one of the 12 o'clock games. And it's like 2:30 or whatever they have to do. The game's ending. It's like, man, I can't watch college basketball. I'm like, why is that? Like college basketball is the best. Like, what's wrong with you? And they're like, the last minute takes 15 minutes. And I was like, you know what? Honestly, that's fair. You're right. You're not wrong. Like the game is supposed to end in 56 seconds.
Let's go.
It takes them 56 minutes to review if a guy's millimeter of his right toe stepped out of bounds. And did he have possession of the ball? And did it last touch him? Or did it somehow grace the millimeter of one guy's hair as it went out of like, what are we doing?
Exactly.
What are we doing? What are we doing?
What's the point? I think it's ridiculous. If Kevin Warren or other power conference commissioners agreed upon a challenge system, I'd be all aboard. And I think when officials have the ability to review whatever call they want in the last 2 minutes, it's hard on the officiating, it's hard on the fans, it's hard on the players. Let's try to get rid of it. I know, Matt, you had some thoughts as we were talking about rules changes in college basketball. What's one that you're sick of here that you think legitimately college basketball should look into changing going into next year?
I hate charge. Charge is a dumb rule. Okay. It's a dumb rule. And it allows people to play defense and be lazy. Right. And it penalizes players for doing good things on offense. It also forces people to learn how to jump stop, which for some reason nobody in college basketball does anymore. And it's really stupid. I really wish people would jump stop more. But regardless, like, yeah, the charge circle is a thing, and I get that, but it's not even called. Like, college officials are so hit or miss. Not even hit or miss. They're just so bad. They're just awful.
Well, they're also overwhelmed. I think the rules are a big part of the problem.
Yes. They have to. There's too much going on for the officials, even though there's like 3 of them, right? There's too much going on for them to keep track of, all right? And they end up making some lousy calls. And so I think making it easier for not only the players to play the game, but for the officials to call the game is in the best interest of the sport. All right.
Exactly.
Like, we don't want to foul. We want the players to play, but if they're playing badly and fouling out, we want that to be an obvious thing, but a rare occurrence. How many people in the national championship game were in foul trouble? Okay.
Yeah. And to me, right at that point, and I know college basketball experimented with this recently in NIT. Maybe just add a foul to the ledger. Give everyone 6 instead of 5, because at the end of the day, you're right. What matters more is seeing the best players decide the game and adding an extra foul to that. And again, they experimented with it in the NIT recently. Might be the way to go.
It's also a very common occurrence to see people by the 3rd media timeout by 8 minutes being the double bonus. Like there's for 8 minutes, they're shooting 2 free throws every time they're fouled. And it cheapens the game. Like people should win by putting shots in the basket from open play. Like it shouldn't be a strategy, like Archie said, to just get to the line. Right? Remember when he said his offensive strategy was going to be get to the free throw lines and we couldn't shoot free throws?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't work that way. It's not it's a gimmick, right? You're basing your offense on a gimmick strategy. Actually make the teams play good defense against good offense. Right? That's better for the product. I have people who watch the NBA and NBA basketball and college basketball. I like that they're separate, but I have friends that can't watch college basketball because they watch the NBA and they're like, I watch college basketball and they don't play basketball. They play foul simulator. And I'm like, I know, you're not wrong, right? That's what it is. And sometimes we benefit from it, right? Trace gets the line a bunch because he gets fouled a lot, but there's got to be a level of physicality, I think, allowed in college basketball because the level of play is lower. I think there's got to be some fouls taken out, aka the charge. I think means it's an old rule, it needs to be taken out. I get that it's in there to teach players to jump stop and do a move in the game and not impede the defense. But the teams have started to take advantage of the rule, right? Like how annoying is it when you watch Wisconsin and Brad Davidson is just throwing himself recklessly in front of people going to the basket? That's not a basketball.
Well, it's also dangerous, right? Like, and you're never going to get a flagrant foul review for standing in front of a guy and taking a charge, but it's a dangerous play. You're not playing defense.
He's not playing defense. He's not making a play on the ball. He's making a play on the offensive player's body. All right. That's not a definition
of a foul, right?
That is a foul, but it's a foul in favor of the defense. Also, it's a 50-50 call, and you're giving referees that already have a lot to look at something to even more pay attention with when they can't even decide who touches the ball last when it's right in front of their face. So it's too much.
It's a lot. Absolutely agree. I just think, that's how wrists and knees and ankles all get hurt. And that's not what you want to see in the slightest. 2 other things. I do think college basketball will seriously look at from a men's standpoint, because it exists in the women's standpoint, quarters instead of halves.
Yeah.
And advancing the ball to half court after late game timeouts. I think those are 2 things college basketball will really look into as far as making those changes. And again, as far as I'm concerned, these predictions are sure to go wrong, but I think these would be valuable changes to college basketball. I see Forrest comment in the live chat saying it's okay to just run over someone. I think push-offs, absurd, offensive, violent plays, absolutely fouled. No question about it. The type of play that I can't stand is the Brad Davison play, which is not fair to put it all on his shoulders, not in the slightest, but you stand in front of someone who has no ability to stop himself or herself as they go and try to score a basket. That's not basketball. That's just standing in front of a human being and putting that person in physical danger and then, getting rewarded for that. So I think that's absolutely ridiculous. Completely on board with you as far as that's concerned. But those are some crazy predictions we have for this upcoming season with player personnel and scheduling and rule changes. I know all of those that we discussed will 100% take place. So make sure you just get ready for that as you prepare for next season. But Matt, as we wind down on this Thursday night, do you have any closing thoughts here? March Madness in the books, off-season underway. It's been underway for a while, but portal things, draft declarations. Indiana's got a lot to decide, NIL stuff, college basketball rules. What's on your mind?
Yeah, so there's a couple things I got left. I think the last thing as far as the rules concerned is actually not like a basketball foul or anything. I think the transfer portal needs to be figured out.
Yeah.
I think it's out of control, but it's out of control, not for the big programs. Like IU is going to be fine with the transfer portal. Anything, the transfer portal benefits Indiana because it's a bit of a safety net. So if we lose a bunch of people to the NBA draft, coaching staff leaves or whatever it is, you can always have the chance to just reload and go for the national title next year if you hit on the right portal guys, right? And given that IU's NIL deals are great and it's Indiana and you're playing in the Big Ten, like IU's going to be in the discussion for a lot of players. It hurts the smaller schools. It's not just the mid-major schools that lose their stars to the portal of people chasing, NBA looks, right, by playing at some of the bigger schools. I'm talking like the D2 and D3 guys that have a chance to move up to Division I, because all of a sudden there are Power 5 players transferring because they're not getting playing time to smaller schools where normally they would be transferring, players would be leaving and graduating, and these players might be looking to transfer up into Division I programs to fill out rosters. And these guys, and these recruits that are fringe Division I recruits, these guys that are doing well, sophomores or juniors in the lower ranks of the NCAA, aren't getting as many looks as they once were. So there's definitely, to me, got to be some sort of quota put on either how many times you can transfer, how long you can be in the transfer portal, how many players from a certain school. Like there's a bunch of different ideas. I don't have
some constraints.
Yes.
As far as, even in the pros, free agency starts on a particular day. In soccer, right, you have a transfer window that's involved, something like that. It would, I think, absolutely help college basketball and football going forward.
Yeah, I think honestly there could be like 2 transfer windows,
fall
right?
and a spring, or winter and a summer. Yeah,
not even, you could just do both in the summer, but there could be there's 2 signing periods, right, or whatever it is. You could do like one right after the national championship, like what's happening right now, which most people would transfer. And then you can do a second one after the NBA draft when everybody's returned back. And then you can do another one just so the teams can fill out their spot. The last thing I would like to add is something that we talked about previously in the podcast and didn't get a chance to talk about, and that was Jalen Hood-Schifino playing the 2. Don't get me wrong. Jalen Hood-Schifino is a fantastic basketball player. I watched him play on Sunday in the national championship game for high school basketball, and he was a pretty good player in that game that was absolutely loaded with talent. By the way, I'm blown away by, I forget his name. He's the bald kid going to Arkansas.
I know who you're talking about.
But
I'll grab it.
I like his game a lot. Malik Renew had a rough game. That's fine. Also, Terrace Reed, who's going to Michigan, looks like the real deal. They'll have at least one of the best backup big men in the country if Hunter Dickinson were to stay. But if Hunter Dickinson's leaving, he's still going to be a fantastic starter for them, even as a freshman.
Jordan Walsh is the player.
Jordan Walsh. I like that
out
dude.
Of Link Academy. Yeah.
Arkansas's got a team next year. Like, don't be surprised if they win the national championship. They got a team. They go like 13 deep. It's crazy. Anyway, that's insane. Jalen Hood-Schifino is not going to start this year. Here's why. It's what pissed a lot of people off last year about Mike Woodson's strategy, but it comes from a NBA style of using lineups together, right? He likes having his lineups. He likes, the 5 subs, bringing in the bench and having them play for a stretch. Like, how OP is it to have Jalen Hood-Schifino be your backup point guard running the second unit? Okay. So that doesn't mean he's not going to play next year, because he's going to play. He'll probably play 20 minutes per game. And it also doesn't mean we won't see him at the 2. But I don't think he'll start because they want him to play the point, not the 2. And even though he'll be the second ball handler and you could have Xavier Johnson play off the ball about a bit, he's going to want to play as the solo point guard in this team. So having, let's say, Malik Renew commits, having a second unit consisting of Jalen Fino and Malik Renew coming in for Xavier Johnson and for Trace Jackson Davis. That's 2 5-stars.
Yeah.
And then you have Miller Kopp, Trey Galloway, and
Tamar Bates.
Well, Tamar Bates in this simulation is starting. So you have Race Thompson coming off the bench,
maybe, yeah.
In that 5. Like that's a starting lineup for some years for IU, right? And that's our 5. Like that's the kind of depth that a Mike Woodson championship caliber winning IU team has. Okay, that's what they have, because you can throw numbers out there at people, and whoever's night it is, they go. He lets them loose. He lets them play. He takes them off the leash, right? So I'm really looking forward to. There's a lot of promise next year's team. If who's coming back comes back, I'm excited for it. Again, this could all change in literally a week. We
it could change in like 10 minutes.
Yeah, we could come back, and I'm talking about Johnny Broom. I'm trying to explain to you how he's the next Trace Jackson Davis from Morehead State, and Malik Renew are going to be fighting for a starting spot, and we don't get a guard in the transfer. There's so much to talk about. There's so much variables, but well,
and that's where it's interesting to me, right? You don't have to be perfect. None of the Final Four teams are perfect. None of the Elite 8 teams are perfect. You don't have to be a juggernaut. There's no such thing. If there is, it's Gonzaga, and we've seen Gonzaga struggle late in the NCAA tournament every single season. So you don't have to be perfect. Coaching, a juggernaut coach was Mike Krzyzewski, and not gonna lie, the way they lost to North Carolina on Saturday was pretty hilarious. It was really, really funny. And it's a testament to, no matter if your face is on the Mount Rushmore of basketball coaches or whatever your ranking is or whatever your pedigree is as a program, like it doesn't matter, right? And how funny was it to see North Carolina in that type of environment with those kind of circumstances surrounding the game, knock off Duke, end their season and Coach K's tenure in basically for the second time in 3-4 weeks. I mean, absolutely hilarious conclusion to the Coach K story. I don't know if Indiana and Purdue will ever have a chance to do that sort of thing, because
that's because it required Purdue making the Final
you would
Four.
have to be or a coach of that stature. But I mean, could you imagine how difficult IU fans would have taken it if first year Matt Painter beat Bob Knight in the Final Four in the Knight's last game as a head coach? That would make everyone's head explode.
I don't know which is worse. I've been trying to think all week about which one is more painful for Duke fans if the outcomes. Is it A, you lose in the Final Four, but you don't make the championship game, so you can't make up that excuse. North Carolina doesn't even win the championship. You lose to your heated rival in the Final Four, but you know what? They don't win the national championship. So they get that win, but you can just be like, you didn't win the national championship. Or B, it's Coach K's last game in the national championship, and you lose to the school that's going to get the death penalty in basketball because they have 4 level 1 NCAA violations coming out, and so that title is not even going to count. Right?
I don't think that would have mattered. This would have been this. This was the worst.
I think this is the worst, but I'm not sure that the losing the title game is that much worse, because it's like the blue ball effect of sending Coach K off with a national championship is right there, and they lose in a very close game to a team that probably shouldn't even be playing in postseason basketball. Or you lose to your heated rival. I don't know which one is worse, but I think the North Carolina one is, if I had to put money on it.
I think it's worth it. It is just comical to see how all of that ended. But with that said, I see one comment in the live chat here as far as Chris, who says, or Forrest, who says we haven't mentioned Caleb Banks or CJ Gunn. I mean, we talked about them pretty endlessly on this podcast. I mean, they have intriguing skill sets, very much rotational pieces as we look ahead to this upcoming season. I've talked about how I think Caleb Banks is the exact kind of 3-4 hybrid that Indiana needs in order to be a successful basketball team. We talked about that a lot in our episode 248. So that's pretty much where that is as far as that's concerned. Yeah, Chris talks about the transfer portal. We're not against it, not by any means. I mean, at the end of the day, I love
the transfer portal. I think it's fun. It gives us content right now. When we're dying for content, we need content.
Well, and it would still be there. I think the important thing is just getting a little bit more constraint involved as far as the start date and end date. Parameters that help every team in college basketball figure some things out. But that about wraps it up for a 249th show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. Thank you to our live audience. You're all beautiful people. To hear more fantastic episodes like the one you heard today, be sure to follow us at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound to make sure you don't miss any in the future. You can also go to our website, indianahq.com, to find it all in one place. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we will see you next time.
Peace and love. Go Hoosiers.